Hello and welcome to Your HR Career. This is series 2 of my podcast, and we're doing something just slightly differently. We're in the realm of friends of HR. There's lots of really great roles in and outside organisations that support and alongside and work alongside us in HR. So I thought I'd invite some of those very interesting people onto the podcast. So our first guest for series 2 is Jen Potter. Welcome, Jen.
Thank you for having me. It's very exciting.
Indeed. So friend of HR, and it will become clear as we talk how you fit into the friend of HR category. And as with all the guests, I sent them a list of questions to prepare beforehand. So you'll hear me referring to that throughout the episode. But I'll be picking out the ones that are most interesting. Some people don't like to admit to any mistakes. Some people never have a wrong foot in their career, but you know, it's my job to try and find it. So we'll dig away. We'll see where we get to. So let's begin at the start then. So the question I generally ask people is about where did it all begin? So tell me a little bit for you, Jen, and kind of how you got into the world of work generally, and then we'll sort of backtrack and find how you got into sort of the people realm. So work generally, where did it all begin for you?
It all began on a graduate scheme working for what is now the giant Vodafone, but was not a giant back then. So I had done a placement year at university for a technology company called Sun Microsystems. And I had had friends who'd gone to work for car manufacturing companies on their placement schemes, who were very excited to have had one product launch a year in their 12-month placement. And I was like, wow, at this tech company, we've had like 20 product launches, and I really liked that fast pace, and it felt like it was exciting. There was future stuff happening. JavaScript, my God, that had only just been invented, which is a bit of a scary thing to say out loud. And so so I applied to all of the mobile phone companies and ended up at Vodafone on the grad scheme.
Okay, and what role were you doing there? Was it a bit of everything?
Yeah, so it was a commercial graduate scheme, which meant you did 4 6-month placements over 2 years in different areas. So I worked in, oh my God, you're testing my memory now. Brand was my first placement. I did a placement in customer relationship marketing, business relationship marketing, and product marketing. I liked product the least.
Okay, but we're very much on the sort of the sales front end. Marketing,
sales and marketing, more marketing really, but yeah.
And what was it about marketing that interested you?
People. So I've always been fascinated by human beings. If there was an engineering role, engineering for humans, I think I'd have followed that career. I've always been really curious. So I did psychology A level. I think I got into marketing pretty much because I was really interested in the research, particularly the qualitative research. I loved sitting behind the mirrored wall, and listening to people. So it's people really
observing. It's quite interesting on these podcasts, the people that I've interviewed and how they got into it, because there seems to be one of two. There's one side which is kind of what you've just described very neatly, which is that sort of I'm interested in how people tick, that kind of psychology side. And then there's a whole other group who are kind of more like police and law and that kind of thing. But observing somebody behind a one-way mirror really mashes those two together, doesn't it?
You're right.
I just had a sort of a police interrogation room flashback Vera moment there.
Me in an alternative universe.
There is something in it, isn't there? That sort of interest in people. Okay, so we've got you. You're in Vodafone. You stay on after your graduate scheme?
Yeah, I stayed for 15 years.
One of those.
Yeah, 15 years. So I stayed in marketing. I specialized in CRM, customer relationship marketing, for a while.
Yeah.
Did that for quite a few years. So looking after the join-in experience. In fact, we completely overhauled the join-in experience, the upgrade and retention part, and then in live stuff as well. So worked with a lot of call centers in that time of my life, which was really cool for different reasons, different people challenges. And then I moved into a consultancy role for 3 years, which was marketing strategy, working with wholesale partners. So that was quite an interesting role. It was a role that I both loved and loathed in equal measures.
Okay. Which bit did you loathe?
We had some really tricky clients. So there was 2 aspects to my role. One was a kind of like Dragon's Den type setup where we had people pitching to us all the time wanting a wholesale deal.
Yeah.
And my job was to kind of really interrogate their proposition from a marketing perspective and whether there was enough of an opportunity there, but also to think about their brand and how it fitted with ours. And then the other aspect was looking after existing relationships. And we had some really big brands that we worked with that were really tricky to work with. I know I was definitely bullied in that role.
Yeah.
With a client in particular, an external client at Vodafone. So it was awful. Yeah, that part of it was really horrible.
And often in sort of the early days of work and management, it can be quite hard to stand up for yourself, can't it? Because it's kind of you're learning how things are and you feel very much on the back foot. And I think many of us can look back. Yeah.
It was a really good lesson for me in many ways, because it really helped me see that I was, you know, even for an organization that really did put people first or tried to, I was a commodity at the end of the day. And a deal that was worth several millions was going to win over, you know, one little woman, you know, with a big voice and a big heart and a strong stream for justice and doing the right thing. You know, I can't compete with a, you know, £50 million contract.
Yeah.
You can end up being collateral damage.
Yeah.
So it was a big wake-up call for me. It really made me think differently about putting myself first.
Yeah. And in those organizations as well, you very much feel like you are replaceable. That if you're not going to do it the way they want, then somebody else will quickly rush in and fill the space.
Yeah, absolutely.
Interesting. So we're very commercial. We're very much kind of pointy end of things. Mobile phones are just getting going. Who knew where they were going to end up? But, you know, I did
move on from that role. Actually, there was another role before I left.
Yeah.
So I came back. That consultancy role was kind of working very external, and I came back into the mothership. And I had a role that was all about transformation and change. So I kind of got headhunted by somebody who I'd worked with in the consultancy role, and she was doing great things, and she'd gone over to become director for this department, and she'd said, I need someone like you in my management team. And I was like, oh no, I don't see myself over there. But I went because she was this amazing female leader, and there weren't many of them at the time, and I knew I would learn loads just by being part of her management team. And that was probably one of the best jobs I did there, and it was the one that I was like, oh, I never saw myself working over here. So a lot about cultural change, training, employee engagement, managing actual technology and business change programs as well. That was the job I was doing before I left.
And you talked a little bit in your the notes that you sent me beforehand about you were going on lots of training programs as a manager because you really wanted to upskill yourself, but a lot of the time you felt you'd want to be in front of the class rather than a student. Tell me about that feeling. What was that? Where did that come from, do you think?
Yeah, so I guess that I became a manager quite young. When I look back now, you know, at the time I was just like, yeah, look at me, I've made it. I've become a manager. And then I only had a really small team, and there was one young girl in that team, and she just did not want to be managed by me. And it was awful, like really awful. I just had this like, yeah, I've made it. Oh shit, I don't know what I'm doing. And why is this woman not responding to all the techniques that I'd responded well to? So I literally was like banging on HR's door, saying, you know, send me on some training programs. I need to learn. And you know, some good ones, some bad ones. We had good deep pockets at the time for training and development, you know, big corporate, I suppose. But the one that really did it for me was when I did my coach training as a manager, so coaching for leaders. Was the one. And yeah, you know, I would spend every training program I went on, it was just reigniting that fascination for psychology and humans and what makes us, you know, why are we the way we are and what gets in the way. And I knew I wanted to be a really good leader, and I knew I'd have to figure out human beings if I was going to be able to do that. And I just spent the whole time going, you know, I was so excited by what I was learning. I just kept thinking about the person up front going, I want to be you. I want to be stood there helping other people get good at this, not sitting here learning it, you know, for me to go and use with my team.
Yes. And so, and as you say, a useful time to be at an organisation that had quite deep pockets at the time. There's a lot of investment in people.
Very lucky.
But it is still quite a stretch, though, isn't it, to think you're coming in, you're dealing with product, you're dealing with marketing and clients and the transformation of what is becoming quite a large organisation. What do you think the catalyst to change was then, that you thought, hang on, I want to be outside of this organization but supporting people? What was that shift then from being manager to thinking about being essentially an L&D professional? How did that come about?
Well, it was a bit of a messy, squiggly way for me. I'd love to say it was a nice, neat, I woke up one morning, had this thought, made this decision and off I trot, but it wasn't. It was much more messy than that. So I spent maybe the last 6-7 years I worked there, banging on the door of L&D saying, let me come and join you, because I could be like a powerful person in your department. You know, I can help you do some good. I'm really good at this stuff. I'm really passionate about this stuff. So I guess I had that awareness, which was useful. And every time I knocked on the door, even with the kind of sponsorship of the director of the department I was in at the time, the head of L&D just kept going, computer says no, thank you. Computer says no, thank you.
Because you didn't have an L&D background?
Maybe, who knows? Never quite got to the bottom of it. It was like a biggest mystery. And then I had that, if I'm going to leave here with the experience that I've got, it's going to be hard for me to land an L&D kind of role or a transformation change role in another organization. So what are my options? And alongside that, there's a kind of like sub story that was happening. So I'd had burnout. I'd carried on with my coach training because that was the one course I went on as a leader that really made a difference in my team. And I started to get really hungry for being able to take that further with my own department. And I'd had burnout maybe 4 or 5 years in the role where I had a really tricky time with that client. I ended up with burnout and I ended up having acupuncture. Long story short, I was so fascinated by my experience of having acupuncture as a patient, I decided the wise thing to do would be to go and get a second degree in acupuncture and Chinese medicine. I'm a little bit like learning. So I was studying this degree at the weekends. And I'd gone down to 4 days. The last year that I was working at Vodafone, I'd gone down to 4 days to help me with that. And so by that point, I was kind of like, I could try and get another job somewhere, but I'm not going to be able to jump into the L&D role I want because I don't come from that background. I had a lot of imposter syndrome around that. Or I could take my coaching and the acupuncture and put it together. And so I kind of went, let's just put myself forward for redundancy and take the leap and see where I land. And I tried to set up both acupuncture and coaching businesses concurrently, like alongside each other. And it was just too much in the end. I did that for about 18 months and then went, can't do both. And there was energy, you know, the work for the coaching part of my work was taking off more so than the acupuncture was. So I just made a decision to focus on one rather than both.
Yeah, and that can often be the right way to take it, can't it? For people who are listening who might be thinking about consultancy, sometimes you don't know which bits are going to sell, and you might have equal love for all of them, but essentially if nobody's buying it, there's no market for it.
And I think
times change, don't they? You know, it depends what current.
Different businesses take longer to establish as well. I think that was you know, there's a maximum you can charge for acupuncture unless you're working on Harley Street. And you need high volume of people, you know, passing through to earn a living. So that was, you know, that was in the mix as well. Like, where can I go where I can get my bills paid? And I was really lucky. It wasn't a case of like, I've got this job I really don't like, but it pays the bills versus this job I really want to do and it doesn't pay the bills. Like I really loved both of them. So I felt like it wasn't really a hard decision in that respect.
Yeah. Okay. And then so thinking about HR a little bit then. So in your working life at Vodafone in those 17 years, you would have got involved with HR. You were involved with the L&D team. Yeah. And then since then, you've been involved with HR people who might be commissioning you to do work.
Yeah, so my clients
alongside them as clients. So one of the questions that I'm asking everyone in the Friends of HR series is, what do you think makes a good HR person in your experience?
I think
she's thinking, listeners.
That's a good question. Kind of a good question when someone has to pause and think. I think for me, it's what I always think is there's L&D and there's HR, and I'm more in the L&D and culture space, and I think we get to do more of the nice stuff in lots of ways compared to HR, because in HR you've got legal requirements for a start, you've got process, you've got policies, you've got the serious end of people. Not that developmental stuff that I do isn't serious, it's serious in a different way. But the risks that you have to manage from a HR perspective is significant. So for me, where I see HR doing really well in an organization is when they've got a good balance between process, task, and relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And a real kind of like, there's some stuff we just have to do and we have to get right. But the way that we do that, we can do it in a very relational, people first approach. And I think that that is the key, being able to straddle those three areas.
Mm-hmm.
And embracing the kind of human approach to that, like that whole person movement.
Mm-hmm.
You know, recognizing that people are actually human beings, and there's legal and process stuff to do, but we are dealing with human beings here.
Absolutely. So I was interested in your description then of L&D and HR. Do you see them as distinct humans?
Yes and no. Yes, I guess from the context I've come from, which was big corporate, was where I grew up, I guess, in my profession.
Yeah.
We had HR teams and we had L&D teams, and they were part of the same department, but they had quite different objectives.
Yeah.
And as someone who was a leader in commercial teams, I would go to my HR business partner to support me with things like reorgs, redundancies, discipline procedures, tricky conversations I was going to lean into. I would go to a HR person, my business partner, and I would say, right, these are the kind of challenges I've got coming up. Recruitment, also with the HR person. Help me figure this out. How do I need to stay on the right side of the law? And is there anything I need to be aware of to do this respectfully? And is there any best practice? And then I would have an L&D partner, and that would be much more about ways of working. So team building, thinking about the departmental culture and how we were integrating in terms of the organizational culture. We had someone from L&D that was kind of more about the way that we were working together and enhancing ways of working.
Okay. Yes, that makes sense.
There was a very, very distinct difference.
And you're right, because in larger organizations, they will be split out as different disciplines. Have you seen one person do both well?
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking that in terms of some of the businesses I've worked with and clients, like they have to kind of have, they have to not have an eye on both. And actually what I tend to see is that the organization's hired in someone with a HR experience that is casting their net into more of an L&D space or overseeing the L&D world. So, healthy culture, team building, team coaching, executive coaching, like they've got an eye on like diagnosis and knowing what's needed and then working with people to get them in. And it's usually, for me, that it's a HR person that they've brought in because of that kind of legal employee law lens that I think you need to have. And I think if you come through the L&D route, maybe that's not as fresh in your mind. But that's an assumption I'm making.
Yeah, so it's a bit more technical, isn't it? There is a bit more technicality around the legalities of it. Interesting. And so how do you interact with HR people day to day then? How do you come across them now in your realm?
I mean, I am friends with lots of HR people because I like people and they tend to like people. So there's definitely that. I mean, the people who commission me are either the HR person, and they can be at all levels in their career, from sitting on a board at exec level right through to HR manager, depending on the size and scope and design and setup of the business. Mm-hmm. And so it's either the HR person or it's the business owner or a director within the business that's either worked somewhere else and seen the value of investing in development. So they know that it's, a savvy, sensible thing to do. Or they know that there's a challenge and they know that they don't have the skills to be able to resolve it quickly and efficiently. Yeah. So yeah, they're the kind of like two people that tend to call me in. So yeah. And with HR people, like our approach is very collaborative and co-creative. So I like to work like a virtual part of the team. So almost like a fractional L&D director, if you like, to sit alongside and be a partner. And our approach is very facilitative. So we're interested in unearthing and unlocking the potential within a business, not coming in as the expert and going, this is how you should do it. Because we recognize every business as an ecosystem and different methods work differently for different organizations.
Yeah, and in sort of small, medium-sized businesses, it's a really good model, isn't it? That HR might be overseeing things and keeping things running, but every now and then they need some expertise for a particular program or to support an individual or to land an idea, whatever it may be. So it's that kind of collaborative approach.
And on the flip of that, I think I also see in larger organizations, senior leaders shouldn't be absolving responsibility for the culture of their team either and going, oh, well, that's HR's problem. Oh, well, L&D are going to fix that for me. Like, we're big advocates of saying, no, they're there, they should be there to support and advise. But if you are the most senior person responsible for this team or this department or this business, you have to care. Like, you have to care, and you have to empower yourself and your people to really take ownership of that, because it won't, my experience, if you're not doing that, it doesn't work. It's not successful, any intervention you do, and you can't leave it with the HR team to sort.
Yeah, and it's common, isn't it, that a team is sent on a course, but the manager of that team doesn't appear. And how much more powerful would it be if they all went through that experience together, and then that leader really owned the holding to account?
Yeah,
or role modelled how to progress it. There's a missing link there, isn't there?
Yeah, and I also think, like, if a leader development program, let's call it might be 1 day or 10 days, is a real opportunity when they're designed well to have some time out to work on the business while you're reflecting on yourself, because it becomes a very reflective space. And you ask questions, and like a lot of the questions that you ask of leaders, like, they're context dependent. So you're asking them to think about themselves as a leader in the business that they're currently working, and they invariably get into conversations about, in order to be able to locate myself, I've got to locate myself in the business. So I think that the leader development programs, when they're done well, give teams an opportunity to really work on the business and inquire what's working, what's not working about the business, as much as, like, what do I need here to be able to be at my best. So senior people who don't get involved in those programs are missing a trick to work on their business with the people that are actually going to make sure that it gets delivered.
Yeah, definitely. Fantastic. Well, we have time for one last question. We could keep talking all afternoon. So tell me then where you are now in your career and what's next for you, if that's not too hard a question.
Also a big question. So I have been running my own business this is my 13th year. I'm going to call it a lucky 13 year. It better be. And we rebranded 3 years ago. So we're now called Frankly. And we have our mission is twofold. First, it's to make sure that for every leader and manager out there that get promoted in their leadership journey, that they can access tools and resources to make sure that they're resourcing themselves to do that job well, so that they're not in the same place I was when I joined, where I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. And then alongside that, we're really passionate about climate change and how that change, which for me is inevitable and it's coming, we're already in it, how that's going to affect the way that we have to lead in our businesses, and how our businesses will need to change to be able to respond to that. So really thinking about how do we future-proof leaders so that they've got the skills, the tools, the models, the frameworks they need to be able to face into that. And so I guess just to say, like, one of the really exciting things for me is this year I feel like I'm having a full circle moment, because we're launching our own Leader as Coach program, which is obviously where this journey for me began all those years back at Vodafone. And I would say to an organization, if you've only got a small amount of budget to invest in your leaders, the one thing you should invest in is coaching skills. Prioritize coaching skills above all else, because for me it was a game changer, and the ripple effect of having coaching skills in your toolkit is just immense. So that's the kind of like big thing in the next quarter for us. So yeah, we're launching that, which is exciting.
Fantastic. I will put a link to your website on the notes of the program, so if anyone is interested to find out more about the Leader as Coach program, they can check it out. Well, fantastic. That is all we have time for. We're probably going to have to do part 2, 3 and 4, I think, to really get into stuff. But thank you so much for your time today, Jen.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, lots in there, and I think it's really interesting for people who are thinking in HR realm, sort of broader, where their careers might go. It might give them some ideas of where they might head in the future. Who knows?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so thanks everybody very much for listening. This is the start of a new series of Friends of HR, so do check them out. You'll find them on my Substack and on my website. Happy listening.